Welcome, everybody, back to Seaweed Brain, a Percy Jackson podcast. We are once again on our Odyssey adaptation journey. We're this summer listening to Lord, listening to Subway by Chappell Roan, listening to Hayley Williams' 10 single. Maybe we're even listening to Fast by Demi Lovato. And we're diving into various adaptations of the Odyssey to help us better prepare for the most important Odyssey adaptation of all time. No, it's not Christopher Nolan's upcoming film, but it's Percy Jackson and the Olympians Season 2. Stick around.
Get ready for back to school with H&M. From mix and match basics to new denim styles, find their favorites for in and out of the classroom at your nearest H&M and on hm.com.
They say to only bring what you can carry. So with the all-new 2025 Ford Expedition Tremor, bring a lot. Like 3 dirt bikes, a few tents, an entire crew ready to make memories. A panoramic 24-inch display, and the confidence to push your limits. The all-new 2025 Ford Expedition Tremor.
Always consult the owner's manual before off-road driving. Know your terrain and trail difficulty and use appropriate safety gear. Max payload varies based on accessories and vehicle configuration. See label on door jamb for carrying capacity of a specific vehicle. Always properly secure cargo.
All right, welcome back. I'm Erica, joined as always by my co-host Carter. Hello, Carter. Good morning.
Hi, good morning. I'm worried we're giving Christopher Nolan too much screen time.
Morning edition, Seaweed Brain is back. The important news you need to start your day. Christopher Nolan is going to get a couple more mentions, I think, on this episode, but not until the end. So we're putting him on the shelf for now. Before we dive into the Penelopiad by Margaret Atwood, which is our adaptation of today, last week we talked about the teaser trailer for Percy Jackson Season 2, and we need to make some apologies / asterisk adjustments. First of all, as I was editing, I noticed an error on my part that I thought surely nobody would notice. And then who noticed? It was Daphne. Thank you, Daphne, for texting me and publicly shaming me for this. Actually, it was privately shaming me for this. But Carter mentioned the music in the trailer is Come Sail Away by Styx from 1977, kind of like in a slowed down version.
Come sail away, come
yes,
sail
see, that's
away
right.
With me.
That's right. And I did sail away, which is not right. That is, of course, the song by Enya from 1988, the Orinoco Flow. So don't listen to me. I thought nobody who listens to this podcast is going to possibly notice that. But of course, I was wrong. It is Come Sail Away by Styx.
They are different vibes. I would say Enya is a little more, at default, unsettling and strange. Whereas the other one, at default, is really yachty, really open, unforeboding, which is what makes the choral rendition so much more of a, an intervention on the bass line.
We're going to be talking a lot about chorus versions today. And I do want to put a pin in yacht rock as a musical language for Luke's journey going forward. And like the rise, I think that we're going to have to revisit as Season 2 goes on and we cover Season 2, like how the rise and fall of yacht rock corresponds to the rise and fall of Luke Castellan. I think that's going to be a really deep mine for us to excavate in a few months.
I feel like his personal journey is going to mirror the personal journey of the Beach Boys across their different eras.
Sure.
He's in the experimental phase of his career, I believe, in the Sea of Monsters.
Absolutely. I think that maybe this will necessitate an entire Patreon episode on the Yacht Rock documentary on HBO because it's so good. There's not too much airtime to the Yacht Rock documentary on this podcast. Okay, moving on to today's activity, which is to discuss the Penelopiad by Margaret Atwood. Margaret Atwood, the one you are thinking of, yes, the feminist speculative fiction author of Handmaid's Tale fame.
Canadian.
And
still alive, I believe. Still working, still doing interviews.
Not you not knowing if Margaret Atwood is still alive.
She is, right?
She's super alive, yeah.
Yeah.
She's 85. So the Penelopiad, we're going to cover the Penelopiad today as though you haven't had time to read it. It's not so much a novel as I would say a novella or honestly like a really long form essay.
Experimental short form writing project, maybe. It does have chapters, but half of the chapters are maybe 1 to 2 pages long. It flies by. If you are curious about it after hearing this conversation, it would be maybe 2 hours out of your afternoon of engaging with this concept and set of ideas.
I feel like if I got a prompt in high school English class that said, write 190 pages on the Odyssey, but it was told from Penelope's perspective, something like this would emerge.
I feel like even taking a step back, if the prompt was tell the story of the Odyssey from a different character's perspective, I think even under those circumstances, this is maybe also what you would turn out.
Yeah. It's not, I don't think, my favorite thing that Margaret Atwood has ever written, but I do think it is very worth reading in this context of what we're trying to do, which is look at all these different adaptations of the Odyssey and see where we hope that Percy Jackson falls within all of these different adaptations. I think what the Penelopiad is asking the reader to do with the story of the Odyssey is something that we would want readers and watchers and consumers of the Odyssey to do, which is, we'll talk about on page 168, to imagine the girls, the maids, the handmaids who are murdered, to imagine them as more than just pure symbol, but to imagine them as real, which is not something I think is necessarily important in every single piece of media across all of speculative fiction. We don't always need to be applying that lens of what are the actual implications of if this was true. But for something that is so pervasive and influential in our culture, like the Odyssey, I think it's really important to say, okay, if this is a story that we're telling over and over again, especially if it's a story we're reading in school on young, impressionable minds, what does it mean to murder all of these women beyond the literary implications?
And we should also take a step back and clarify what the project of the book is, which, I mean, from the name Penelopiad, what you would probably get is that this is Penelope's version of events, which is, I would say, mostly true. However, the structure of the book is alternating chapters between Penelope's perspective, which is told not unlike Percy Jackson's perspective and the Percy Jackson books, which is to say this kind of like diaristic, retrospective, first person in conversation.
Not unlike Circe as
with
well.
A reader, not unlike Circe. Yes, it's like I think a fairly common form of narrative voice in the like feminist memoir autofiction type
Percy
of
Jackson,
space.
greatest feminist known in the feminist memoir space.
But so those chapters are being alternated with chapters that are being told in super different structures, voices from the perspective of the 12 maids who Odysseus and Telemachus kill at the end of the Odyssey for allegedly sleeping with, conspiring with. It's kind of vague what specifically they're being charged with, but for having an improper relationship with the suitors. They're hanged by, I believe all the tellings say, Telemachus under Odysseus's orders.
So the entire structure of the novella is written a la a Greek play. So we have the storytelling and then we have the chorus response to the storytelling alternating back and forth. More on that structure later.
Yes. But what the chorus looks like, I think, interestingly, is super different every time, where sometimes it is a classic Greek chorus where they're trying to say the things that kind of get dropped out of Penelope's narrative that you as the reader might be thinking or feeling or curious about or what have you. And then other times the form of it is super different, where they will describe like an interpretive dance, or they will present a lecture, or they will have it be a very structured poem.
Is now a good time to talk about the quotes at the beginning of the book?
Yeah.
Big shocker, everybody. We're about to read quotes from the actual Odyssey for the first time ever on Seaweed Brain Podcast. Only the ones Margaret Atwood felt were important, though. So the Penelopiad starts with, from book 24, verses 191 to 194 of the Odyssey, shrewd Odysseus.
Oh, verses.
Is it not verses?
It's not the Bible.
Lines? It's not the Bible. Wait, is it lines? What should I say?
I feel like it's not verses, but I don't actually know what you would. I think it maybe is lines.
I think the amount of times I've gone to church still somehow outweighs in my life the amount of times I've like read and discussed poetry. So we're gonna go with verses 191 to 194. Shrewd Odysseus, you are a fortunate man to have won a wife of such preeminent virtue. How faithful was your flawless Penelope, Icarius' daughter. How loyally she kept the memory of the husband of her youth. The glory of her virtue will not fade with the years, but the deathless gods themselves will make a song for mortal ears in honor of the constant Penelope. Second quote, book 22, verses 470 to 473. He took a cable which had seen service on a blue-bowed ship, made one end fast to a high column in the portico, and threw the other over the roundhouse, high up, so that their feet would not touch the ground. As when long-winged thrushes or doves get entangled in a snare, so the women's heads were held fast in a row with nooses round their necks, to bring them to the most pitiable end. For a little while their feet twitched, but not for very long.
Interestingly, she does not name a translator.
I love that for her. So we have these two quotes. The first one speaking so highly of this constant, patient woman, and then the second describing this awful, brutal violence towards women that Odysseus shows with his son. It's hilarious. I think it's meant to immediately make you go, yeah, not so good, huh? And just set you up for the rest of the story, which is that I think what I have to imagine is what a lot of people have experienced. What a lot of people have experienced reading the Odyssey in school, thinking to themselves, how can both of these things live together in the same text? And that uncomfortability is what this book is born out of. Like, how can you say this and then also this about women? And how can you praise this woman and then murder these women? How is the woman above supposed to feel about the woman below?
Mm-hmm.
I love that somebody who, like Margaret Atwood, is a very successful author, said, this has bugged me my whole life. This has always bugged me.
Yeah.
I don't like this. And I'm going to say something about it in less than 200 pages.
Especially, I guess, I was maybe less blown away with it because of the context of reading Circe. And I think having spent a lot of years in the critical milieu such that the idea of critiquing Odysseus doesn't feel necessarily like a huge innovation from a feminist perspective. But I'm sure at the time... 2005. Like, there have been female classicists for many years at that point, and I'm sure that this is not the first time someone had come up with these ideas, but like I have to imagine that as far as like what was available in print and like what people would see at the front of the bookstore, that like that even conceptual framing would have presented itself more in contrast to what people are coming in with than maybe you might find for yourself now.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think in 2005, I'm sure that there were plenty of, like you said, feminist classicists who had these kinds of thoughts and put them down into writing before, but probably not that were at the front of the bookstore and accessible to the same amount of people who had also been forced to read the Odyssey in school and probably had this same feeling and could now be validated by this.
Should we like do overview?
Well, that was my take. Do you have a different take on it?
I liked the maid sections kind of a lot. I felt like the maid sections kept me interested, and the Penelope sections were very serviceable at doing what they were supposed to do, but I don't feel like I felt that differently or learned necessarily that much from them, because they were very like kind of down the middle, like a linear in time for like retelling of the events with like a slightly different perspective where you're getting her thoughts on things, but her thought, like she's not being reinvented as a character from what you see in the Odyssey. It's not like she was a, dark schemer this whole time, or conversely that she has like this radical set of knowledge or insights that was powering her through all of this. She is like a regular person who is like smart and interesting, but kind of doing what you might expect at first principle she might be doing and thinking based on what you would have read in the Odyssey, which is fair. With one exception, this kind of bothered me, that because the story is told retrospectively, we as the reader are interacting with Penelope in present day. Like Penelope is living in 2005, I guess.
I was going to say that's my actual favorite part of this, is that the entirety of this narrative is coming to us from the fields of Asphodel.
The fields of Asphodel I like. One of my favorite sections in her narrative is running into Helen several times in the underworld and having these passive-aggressive interactions with her about how they still haven't reconciled their respective roles in the Trojan War.
It reminded me so much of Pasiphae and Circe interacting.
Yes. Yeah. Super interesting. And I think fundamentally, like what this is giving you, I guess, is the true irreconcilability of their perspectives, where like it has been thousands of years. They have no stake in it anywhere because they've been dead for thousands of years. Nothing materially can happen to them anymore related to these events. And still, they're just not the same person. They're on the same page. They can like predict the other's behavior, but they can't empathize in a true and deep way with what the other person did or felt back then, even after all this time. That part I'm okay with. The part that bothered me, I was going to say specifically, is these references to the process of industrialization and modernization from the perspective of a woman who's been dead for thousands of years.
Oh, you didn't like that she was like,
I was
cell
gagging
phones,
for
am I
randomly
right?
being like, yeah, cell phones, weird.
I loved that.
I hear you have the internet now up there. You heard about me through that the interwebs or whatever they have going on. That I was maybe not gagging for.
I just personally love that because that to me really felt like a play from 2005. Like,
It
so
felt of its time.
comforting to me.
Very what would have been going on, New York theater.
Yes, exactly. It really felt like I was in a little black box space in Chelsea with a woman in a chair going, yeah, I'm Penelope. You heard about me. Or like, frankly, a UCB character showcase. Like,
Yeah.
I'm in limbo now, but I'm going to tell you my side of the story. Ugh, Helen again? Get that bitch
Yeah.
out of here.
I'm in hell, but you know what the real hell is for you is maybe those
Cell
new
phones.
drinks at Starbucks or something, you know?
I don't know. That's me personally, though. That's funny to me forever.
I did feel a little bit of that. And specifically the juxtaposition between Penelope talking about, I don't know, the 60s or 70s and things that happened against the very like artsy fartsy things that were going on in the chorus where they would turn into owls or they would describe forms of movement to you in the book. That marriage, to your point, is very of its time theater.
Yes, it is almost nuts to me that the way that I ingested this was by reading it on a page and that like Margaret Atwood wrote this down and it was published. And that's how this came to me because it feels so tangibly like a devised theater piece.
Yes.
We're in high school theater class. Actually, no, definitely college. We're in college theater class. We have a semester. Unfortunately, only 10 girls are in the class. So we have to do all-female Pippin, which is something I did in high school. All-female Pippin. This is all-female devised
all-female
Pippin. Thank you so much. So did I. I had a really good time.
Yeah, Erica was one of
Let's not get into the details. But if you gave 10 women a semester to devise a piece of theater retelling the Odyssey, it would have all of these weird chorus interjections where they'd be doing a lecture and then they'd be doing a dance piece and then they'd be like having probably like a slow motion combat battle.
Mm-hmm.
And so for that, I enjoy how both extremely serious and deeply unserious this collective narrative is.
This frame is really helping me unlock some things because the one critique that I think you might have about the chorus side of things is that because like she's trying to create whole people out of what essentially is like a really small amount of text in the Odyssey. I think there's one named person, and other than that, definitely we don't have individual characteristics that says like the 8th versus the 7th of the like maids interacted in this way because one of them was very ebullient and the other one had a different childhood because she was from a different city state or something. Like none of that. It gets arguably repetitive. It's thematically repetitive. It is they're not treading new ground as far as experiences, things that we're mining from the text. So it kind of is like it feels like a theater exercise of like we're going to kind of go back to the same two moments but give it to you in a slightly different genre formatting and emphasizing a slightly different emotional aspect of what could have been happening to us across each one of these repetitions.
I would like to say also that I don't want to be harsh on this book because we read Madeline Miller Circe first, given that Madeline Miller Circe comes over a decade after this.
Yeah, with the benefit.
If anybody has a clip or a quote of Madeline Miller talking about the Penelopiad, I would love to hear it. I would guess that she felt inspired by this, and there are a lot of similarities. Even though these are separate narratives from separate characters in the Odyssey, there are so many similarities, and there were just a couple I wanted to shout out since we spent so much time on Circe. Like, one of my also this is my favorite back in my day line that comes from Penelope in this book on page 8. She says, "The teaching of crafts to girls has fallen out of fashion now. I understand. But luckily, it had not in my day. It's always an advantage to have something to do with your hands. That way, if someone makes an inappropriate remark, you can pretend you haven't heard it. Then you don't have to answer." There's a lot of talking about weaving and spinning a thread of my own story and the importance of crafts making, which is delightful.
And weaving is back. That's how you can tell it's 2005.
Something bubbling up of tradwife culture, me learning how to crochet. I'm scared for my own life. I don't know. 2025, it's back again. I also want to say, I feel like Odysseus, as characterized in this book, is almost identical to Odysseus characterized in Circe. Very similar, unknowable, still like sexy, charming, but ultimately
scary.
Who is he? We don't know.
Yeah,
maybe scarier.
Scary, but not because he's unskilled or charmless or whatever. Like, you believe that he would be able to accomplish the wild set of things that he does, but that's not necessarily something that we like.
And the only reason he feels scarier in the Penelopiad is because this is Odysseus, years after we really meet him in Circe. I reasonably could think this is the same exact character who was on the island at Circe's, and then all those trials and tribulations later lands back in Ithaca. This is, I think, how scary he would feel.
Well, we get him before and after in this. Like, we
true.
also see him like in the perspective of Penelope as basically like a child, like a 14-year-old girl interacting with him for the first time, trying to figure out how to navigate this relationship. And that's, to me, like, that was the scariest part, was being in her head as that was happening. And rather than being Circe, immortal goddess, interacting with this man who is still terrifying and is still trying to, harm us and all of that. But the voyaging as a child into the lair of this strange and frightening man who is unreadable, and where, like, you don't really understand what his motivations are. Horrifying.
Many turnings. My favorite parallel between Circe and the Penelopiad is in the characters of both of their mothers. Because remember, Circe's mom is this like river naiad nymph, very slippery. Is there a nice word I can say that is allowed to be said on the internet? I don't know. She slays in her own way. And also in
severe.
The Penelopiad. Severe, but in a slippery way. We have a lot of Penelope talking about her own mom, who is also in this version characterized as being a naiad. On page 43, Penelope says, "As for my mother, she'd stopped swimming around like a porpoise long enough to attend my wedding, for which I was less grateful than I ought to have been. There she sat on her throne beside my father, robed in cool blue, a small puddle gathering at her feet. She did make a little speech to me as the maids were changing my costume yet again, but I didn't consider it to be a helpful one at the time. It was nothing if not oblique. But then, all naiads are oblique. Here is what she said. Water does not resist. Water flows. When you plunge your hand into it, all you feel is a caress. Water is not a solid wall, it will not stop you. But water always goes where it wants to go, and nothing in the end can stand against it. Water is patient. Dripping water wears away a stone. Remember that, my child. Remember you are half water. If you can't go through an obstacle, go around it. Water does."
I see what you mean as far as the parallelism. It's very inexact. I feel like this is actually fine, passable advice, even if it is the only advice.
I think it's interesting that both Margaret Atwood and Madeline Miller found a way into this kind of slippery woman who maybe as readers we do not like, but that we can imagine that the reason why they behave the way that they behave in the setting that they're in is because it is the only option to go around and to flow like this. That they are the product of their circumstances,
Yes.
And that those women then raise the women that we get to talk to. We don't prefer the way that they raised us, but we can understand where they came from. And now we're going to come into things from a different way.
Yeah.
I think it's interesting that it would be the same circumstance for both of these characters, different characters at different points in the story.
And to the point that Madeline Miller presents in Circe, it's also tapping into this idea of naiads as fundamentally being wives. That like nymphs exist to play this role, and that literally making them both like nature spirits is emphasizing through the use of this supernatural identifier, that instinctual understanding of why their moms are the way they are and what was expected of them.
Yes, and this idea that for all of us, our mothers will always be figures who are frustrating in their own femininity and the way that they, right? Like that we have everybody at any point in time is going to see the generation above them as, in a way, disagreeable in their own relationship to their womanhood and how they use their womanhood to relate to the world, no matter what generation you're in. But we can understand why they had to be that way, and we're going to maybe be a different way with it. I think that takes us to my favorite section of the book, which is chapter 24, the chorus line anthropology lecture. If you only want to read one section of this entire book, I would say read this one. It's very funny because it brings up all of these counter arguments that I'm sure have been used throughout history about what the murdering of these girls could possibly represent or entail in the Odyssey. And basically Margaret Atwood defending her own thesis and saying, BS.
They are taking questions from an imagined audience, and they are presenting the imagined audience's arguments for them in a sarcastic tone. They are framing through the satire of the chapter the idea of, say, like comparing the killing of these girls to the like completion of an old ritual to Artemis or something is ridiculous, like akin to numeracy or a, you know, like off-the-shelf online conspiracy theory or something like that. And they end by refocusing on their human lives as opposed to what associations or metaphorical flattenings you might be able to provide.
There's also a shout out in this chapter to the same religious practice that The King Must Die by Mary Renaud is about, when they say, the great mother cult among the Minoans, the axe is used to lop off the head of the year king at the end of his term of 13 lunar months, which is definitely something that people would bring up, but also I think fun that it's a reference to the person who came even before Margaret Atwood and Madeline Miller, who is Mary Renaud, writing these Greek myth retellings from a woman's perspective. But they end by saying, we could go on. Would you like to see some vase paintings, some carved goddess cult objects? No? Never mind. Point being that you don't have to get too worked up about us, dear educated minds. You don't have to think of us as real girls, real flesh and blood, real pain, real injustice. That might be too upsetting. Just discard the sordid part. Consider us pure symbol. We're no more real than money. This I found very satisfying. Anyone who's ever been in a classroom and felt like, why are we ignoring this entire aspect of the story that is so uncomfortable?
Yeah.
I do feel like the entire project of the novel is worth it for how satisfying it is to read this like very sarcastic chapter.
Yeah. I feel like this is the most sass that is in the book. And I also feel like this chapter is kind of, I think thesis is maybe even too reductive. I don't know. Like, I think that this is the project of the book. The idea that you would recast these maids as people with a point of view, with anger, and who would be like rightly uncompromising about the value of the people who have allowed this to happen to them, which includes Penelope. I think that we've kind of been dancing around it, but like the juxtaposition is not just that like they were both existing there at the same time. Like there are aspersions being cast in mostly the direction of the maids to Penelope, saying that like she wasn't sufficiently protective of them, that they were helping her, and that as queen, as someone with definitely like not that much agency, but a lot more than they have, that she was wrong to not take more of a stand to try to help them. And there are these illusions of all of them being in the fields of asphodel together and the maids all avoiding Penelope, who is trying to follow them and apologize or chat or whatever.
I think that this chapter being a way to summarize the point of the entire project, I just wanted to say that I feel that any adaptations of the Odyssey, and I don't think any one-to-one adaptations of the Odyssey where we're like really telling the story of the Odyssey. Percy Jackson doesn't really count. SpongeBob SquarePants movie doesn't really count, right? These are pieces of media that are taking little bits of the Odyssey and putting them into a story, as opposed to like, say, Christopher Nolan's The Odyssey movie. I don't feel like we can engage in the story and not treat this as a moment of horrifying violence, right? Like,
yes.
I don't think that we should just be retelling the Odyssey and skipping this.
Yeah.
I think that if we're going to retell the Odyssey, we have to treat this incident as imagining the girls as more than purely just symbol.
Yes.
And treating it as a moment of horrific, terrifying violence. And so there's no way to do that without then seeing Odysseus in this horrifying, monstrous, terrifying light. And so therefore, I get a little bit scared and a little bit uncomfortable and a little bit stressed out whenever it seems like there's an adaptation, a one-to-one adaptation of the Odyssey coming up that is going to paint Odysseus as anything other than at the end of the film or the book or whatever, completely terrifying and horrifying and scary. Again, to go back to Cersei, Madeline Miller does such a great job with not glossing over this horrific event. And instead, that horrific event in the context of Cersei is the thing that draws Cersei and Telemachus together, saying that they have both done these awful, awful, horrible things, and that together they're going to do better in the future in like mending the world instead of breaking it apart. All of this is just to say, I am curious what will happen in the Christopher Nolan movie in regards to this one very, 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 very specific part of the Odyssey. And we can talk about it when it happens.
Yeah. And I'm curious.
This is me trying to calmly, in a way that men cannot get scared of or tune out of, explain why I am hesitant to ever consume anything where it seems like we are glorifying the character of Odysseus.
Yeah. I mean, mind you, we just had Oppenheimer. In many ways, it's probably going to be the same story. It's going to be brilliant man does a thing that he feels bad about and is consoled by two different one-dimensional women with gratuitous nudity, and we don't actually meet any victims of anything. But we'll see.
I'm not out here saying, don't misinterpret me, because I am not personally out here saying that we can't tell stories about complicated characters who do bad things. Yeah. I love a complicated character who does bad things. So long as we are left to feel complicated about that character and not left to feel as though we should be forgiving them in some way, as though we don't have the room to ask ourselves, is this character so complicated? And perhaps maybe where I am feeling personal about it is less so on the part of the filmmakers, but more so on the part of the people, the young men who will, no matter what the filmmaker does, interpret it a certain way. I am nervous about boys of a certain age being like 10 to 40, no matter what an auteur does on the screen, thinking, dang, I want to be like that guy.
Yeah.
How do we curb that effect? I don't know. I don't have the answer.
There's an amazing set of Brew Additional videos. I think one of them is Patreon locked and the other one is on YouTube, that are about this idea of like not accepting filmmaker intent when looking at media made for young men when it comes to the presentation of male violence, war. Basically saying like it's insufficient to say that like I have a complicated perspective as a director. I'm not trying to glamorize this as a director, and saying like, well, if somebody did, then there was a failure, there was an issue, and you need to maybe be more critical about what methods you're using in storytelling in order to clearly present this perspective and the perspectives of like other people involved in these incidents, such that it's like really difficult to walk away with that. Like I like the case studies she used, I think, are the Alex Garland war movie and what is the other one? American Psycho.
Not to make this about Scott Pilgrim, but I'm also thinking about one of the greatest examples that we have, an entire culture of boys misinterpreting the point of the piece of media.
500 Days of Summer, I would say, is the exact same phenomenon.
Absolutely. Yeah. We cannot force feed critical media analysis skills to boys. But if we could, we would. And until we find out a way to do that, we're just going to keep doing this little podcast.
This is making me feel a lot better about the Penelopiad, to be honest. Because I do feel like is like, yeah. But like, I could show this to somebody and be like, you know, like, read this. It'll take 2 hours. And I guess I understand the project of the theatrical repetition, almost like actor exercise-y thing that we're doing here, where it's like, it's just about the experience of stewing in the perspectives of people who are not really people on screen in the Odyssey for a long time. And then having to, every time you think about the Odyssey after that, also think about this experience that you had of stewing in these perspectives and considering them as not metaphors, but people.
Yeah. Can we maybe close out? Sorry. Yeah. This has just gone in a way that I am now feeling scared about being so honest on the internet, but we're going to keep it in the episode. This is where we're at. This is what this podcast is for. Bravely yelling to ourselves in the echo chamber of our own podcast for other people.
Christopher Nolan, I heard Inception was good.
Christopher Nolan, The Prestige is one of my favorite movies. Nobody get it twisted. especially not casting directors who will listen
Giving
to this
Timothée
podcast.
Chalamet an acting career? You popped off a little bit with that one. Congratulations.
My family loves to watch Inception on Christmas Day. Don't get it twisted, all right? Don't get it twisted like young men watching anything who will somehow manage to get everything twisted. All right. We're going to end on a lighter, more happier, feminist experimental theater note, because that's what we want to leave ourselves with today. In researching for this episode, I found out that there was an entire staging of the Penelopiad at the Goodman Theater last year that I somehow didn't know about or get an appointment to audition for. What's up with that? Starring our favorite Jennifer Morrison from Once Upon a Time. I almost called it Entering Storybrooke. That was the name of our podcast about Once Upon a Time. Once Upon a Time, Jennifer Morrison played Penelope, and they didn't have a writer. They just literally adapted the actual text of the Penelopiad to the stage, which makes sense because, like we said, it's set up like a play with the chorus. There's a great promo video of the cast talking about the show where you can see footage from rehearsals, so you can kind of imagine how they might have staged it. If anybody has a slime tutorial and want to send it my way, please do. And I wanted to leave us off with a video interview of Susan V. Booth, the artistic director at the Goodman, who directed this adaptation of the Penelopiad, talking about the text and bringing it to the stage. This is from the Goodman Theater's YouTube page. It's called Susan V. Booth on Margaret Atwood.
I think Margaret Atwood's one of the great minds of our time. And so the notion of telling the story of Odysseus from the point of view of the women left behind just felt like an invitation. The play version of the Penelopiad is a mix of Penelope speaking directly to the audience, telling the story of waiting out her husband's long trip to Troy and return, and these 12 maids, these 12 women who were left behind in Ithaca, who tell their story through song, through movement. What Margaret Atwood does is tell female stories of women who are right on the margins of power. And she does it without wringing her hands and saying, oh, how unfair it all is. She creates these wildly vivid characters with whom you fall very much in love as a reader, as a viewer. How dare we render anyone ever invisible? And yet every day we all do. And what I think this play does is somewhere in your gut, not in your brain, somewhere in your gut, remind you, look to the edges of the story.
I like that.
Did that fade out work? I slowly pulled my phone further and further away from the microphone. That was just for you, listeners. Anyway, look to the margins of the story is, I think, what I want us to close off with as far as moving forward with Percy Jackson, Sea of Monsters, with looking at any single piece of media, any story whatsoever, at any point in time, look to the margins of the story.
Yes. Perfect.
We'll challenge ourselves with the Sea of Monsters by asking, what is that undead soldier doing there at the margin of the frame? What's their story, huh?
Yeah, we should make an experimental theater piece of different performances of the crew of undead soldiers and really exploring their story.
Yes. On that note, thank you all for joining us. I believe next week we're going to begin to talk about the Odyssey TV miniseries from 1997.
It is on Zumo Play, Tubi.
Oh, no.
Roku. Oh, it's on Amazon Prime.
Okay.
Also Tubi. Let me not disparage Tubi like that.
Join me all in singing. Jeffrey Bezos. We will see you guys next week. And if you don't want to watch it on Amazon Prime, that's fine. We'll summarize it for you. Bye, all.